Hey soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast, where we are talking all things Major League Soccer and the Chicago Fire. I'm your host Nick, and in tonight's episode we're going to look at the Chicago Fire's preseason results and go over their preseason schedule. We're going to examine Brian Gutierrez's interview with Lizzie Bescherano, where he's open to playing for the Mexican national team, as it turns out, and we're going to wrap the show by looking at the latest Chicago Fire acquisition, a familiar name to those familiar with Major League Soccer. All this and more in tonight's episode, so stay tuned. Welcome back once again, soccer fans. It is a fine evening this January 29th as I record our latest episode of the Feed the Fire podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again. I'm your host, Nick, and we're going to be looking at things Chicago Fire, Major League Soccer. But first, a few housekeeping things. First of all, thanks to everyone who has listened, who has liked, subscribed, rated, reviewed, found us on Good Pods, found us on iTunes. I'm seeing the steady growth, even in the off season, of all the metrics on how podcasts are measured. So thank you to everyone who's finding us. Continue to share the link, share the news, tell everyone about the show. If you hate the show, then tell people you don't like about the show. Make them suffer with you. Fine. Whatever it is, I'm happy to be talking Chicago Fire, Major League Soccer, and I'm even happier to have y'all listening. One other housekeeping matter. Remember, for all your non-Major League Soccer Chicago Fire coverage now, make sure you go find Adnan Besic at ADNAN BASIC 19 on Twitter. He was a former Chicago Fire credentialed press member, but sadly they pulled his press credentials because he had just the audacity in him to say the Chicago Fire aren't worthy of our support because of their continued failures and continued doing the same thing leading to those same failures. How dare he point out what actually is going on in the Chicago Fire organization? Just the audacity. Shame Adnan. But anyway, he's going to continue his coverage of Chicago House and all the other lower division teams, semi-pro teams here in the Chicagoland area. Make sure you go check him out. Also, last week, we ripped on Klopas' coaching staff. I took a little bit of a deep dive into their backgrounds and credentials. So go find last week's episode to get yourself acquainted with the coaching staff that Frank Klopas has brought in for what I'm hoping is just a one-year wash of a season. And speaking of that, let me add a little postscript to last week's episode. Something that I was talking with our featured guest, John Donovan, about. And while he didn't send in a clip this week, he did give me a little bit to think about. Now, John's a businessman. After his playing days down in Venezuela, he ended up coming back to the States, founded a few businesses here, become very successful. His kids are now taking those over. So John knows a little bit about the insight into a business owner like Joe Mansueto. Now, as a billionaire, though, especially, right? John said, look, billionaires don't get rich by spending their money, or by giving away their money, by entering into bad contracts. And there's also a sports ownership philosophy that you don't want to be paying to ex-coaches. You don't want to be on the hook for 3 contracts, your current coach, the one you just fired, and the one you fired right before that. That's just bad business. So you kind of put those mindsets together, rather than having Hendrickson on the payroll, Frank Klopas on the payroll, everyone from the last couple of coaching staffs on the payroll, and then going out and hiring a third coach with a new staff. Well, it'd just be cheaper to let Klopas, maybe throw a few more bucks at him because now he's the head coach. It might just be cheaper to keep Klopas in and then bring these, guys who've all been around the league, like Nagamura, and a guy Needs, who's their set piece specialist, who's been all over England and the United States lower divisions. It might just be cheaper to just let these guys have a year at it and see what happens, than again having to fire everyone and start over from scratch. And that also kind of fits another narrative where they say that they couldn't get a better coach, that the Chicago Fire couldn't get a better coach than Frank Klopas, or these kind of ragtag group of assistants that nobody really knows how Klopas is connected to all of them. Maybe it's just Heitz and Pelzer, right? So that fits that kind of narrative. They couldn't get anyone else. Might as well just consider it a wash of a season. Mansueto also knows Heitz and Pelzer have his money in their best interest. They'll protect his money. So that's why they got extensions when everything else seems to point to, again, this ragtag kind of composite coaching staff here, which all tends to lead me to believe that the big DP striker signing this offseason that's rumored to happen, that Klopas hints at, but you can't say anything because you don't want to jinx it. You never know how these things go. To me, I think that none of that's going to happen. That DP striker, not going to happen. They've been doing things on the cheap. We'll talk about the next Chicago Fire acquisition. Again, to me, all it is a bookkeeping move. So with that being said, first of all, I hope they prove me wrong and get that number 9, that DP striker. But that was kind of an additional conversation John Donovan and I had. Kind of gives you a little bit of a rationale into how a billionaire businessman will think. He's like, look, I'm not going to go out and blow money on a third coaching staff in 3 years. We're not getting the big signings. We're not getting our targeted players. Might as well just roll out what we had in Klopas and Co. and then start again next season. So that is kind of the thinking there. Looking into now some of the actual content we were going to talk about today, the Chicago Fire preseason. They are 2 games into their preseason. So let's take a quick recap of the preseason schedule and what happened in these couple games. So the preseason started back on January 13th with team medicals. They headed down to Bradenton, Florida, to the IMG Academy on January 15th and had their first preseason game January 23rd against Loudon United. Then more recently, on the 27th, they had their second preseason game against New York Red Bulls. They returned to Chicago that evening, and they have off now the 28th through the 30th. So hey, maybe you'll see a few Chicago Fire players bumming around town, enjoying Chicago in the wintertime. Or trying to, at least, right? A little gray, a little dreary. Now, starting at the end of January, on the 31st, they'll be training at SeatGeek Stadium through February 4th. Then on February 5th, they'll travel to Coachella Valley, California for the Coachella Invitational, where they will take on Austin FC on February 7th, LAFC on February 11th, and Minnesota United on February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. They'll be taking them on at the Empire Polo Club, and the final matchup at Coachella against the Portland Timbers on February 17th. And then they'll return home from Chicago to begin preparations for their season opener at the Philadelphia Union. So that is the quick breakdown of the Chicago Fire's preseason schedule. Now, looking at their first 2 games, they defeated Loudon United 5-1. Even if it's a preseason game, the Chicago Fire should be winning a game against Loudon United. Loudon United plays in the USL Championship, and this isn't to scoff at the USL Championship, but it's preseason for these guys, right? And when you have players of the caliber that the Chicago Fire do, at least on paper, they should be playing far superior to that of Loudon United, especially in the preseason. The ceilings, or I should say the floor for the Fire is much, much higher than the floor for Loudon, all things being equal at the beginning of the preseason. But where I saw some encouragement, even in this 5-1 wash of a preseason game, was that the Chicago Fire were up 3-0 after 30 minutes. Shaqiri gets the opener in the 3rd minute. So I'm glad to see that they came out with a little purpose, a little motivation. They were prepared. Again, even if it was a preseason game, you can even in a regular season game, in a cup final, any game, you should always be prepared and ready to go from the first whistle, and the Chicago Fire were. So that is an encouraging sign from the Fire. Real quick sidebar here. Loudon United was DC United's farm club affiliate team, but last year they sold a majority stake in the club, so they are no longer majority owners of Loudon United. They still, I think, retain some minority interest in ownership, and this is kind of in line with MLS clubs focusing their development not on affiliations with lower division clubs, rather focusing on MLS Next Pro. So that's kind of the explanation there that I've been reading about. So Loudon United is now not majority owned by DC United. The goals in this game, Shaqiri, as I mentioned, Koutsias, Herbers, Shabilko, and the fifth one coming from their second round draft pick, I believe, Wooten, Lawrence Wooten, who signed a contract with CF2. Second or third round pick, I forget. But nice to see Shaqiri, your star, Koutsias, your striker, Herbers, your role player, Shabilko, possibly your second striker coming off the bench, give you a lift guy, and then Wooten, your draft pick. So like they had a bunch of different guys getting involved, which was nice to see. Again, it's a preseason game. I'm not going to read too much into it, but these are the positives that we can take away from it before I go all negative inevitably at some point in the season. Their second match was a 2-2 draw against the Red Bulls of New York. Chicago's goals were by Brian Gutierrez and Tom Barlow. Barlow gets his first in a Chicago Fire uniform, and he was assisted by Chris Mueller, his former teammate at the University of Wisconsin. Wisconsin. Go Badgers. Woo! But the highlight from this game, as nice as it was to see the energy and I don't want to say the desire, but just like maybe the urgency or the seriousness. That's a better word. The seriousness that the Fire took this game, the highlight of it was New York's new signing, Emil Forsberg, yes, that Emil Forsberg, scoring from his own half. Please, go find the clip of this goal. He was playing in his own half, just deeper than where the center circle ends at his own half, little off to the left. He picks his head up from there, from that center left back spot on the field, sees the Chicago Fire goalkeeper not just cheating a little far up, and I think it was Chris Brady. I couldn't really see who it was on the video, and because of the way Apple and MLS are not broadcasting the games, there really isn't too much coverage of this. And another sidebar, Your Honor, here. I actually got a lot of the information on this game from the Red Bulls website. They talked about it from a Red Bull perspective. Why isn't the Chicago Fire website even just giving you like a blurb about, oh, we had a 2-2 draw with Red Bulls and goals were scored by Barlow and Gutierrez? Like, no, you can't even do that. Like, either MLSsoccer.com put out like a quick summary of all the preseason games, or I had to go to the opposing team's page to get it, or I had to go to third-party media outlets' random websites to find information. Like, come on, CF. Let's go. I hear how great of a place it is to work, supposedly. Maybe that's just because you're not doing anything. You just get paid and enjoy yourselves. But hey, what do I know? I'm not in the building. All I know is that you're not covering your team. All right, end sidebar. So anyway, get back to Emil Forsberg. He's in this center left back position, sees the Fire goalkeeper not just cheating forward, as they do when teams tend to play long balls over the top. The Chicago Fire keeper is completely outside of his own box. He is even further than the little semicircle at the top of the 18. He is past that. He's like even with his center backs. It is a wildly forward position, even for the sweeper keeper types to be playing. And Forsberg picks his head up and just launches one from his position in his own half. And I'm not saying like he's not just, over the line into his half. He is like 15 yards into his own half and scores from there. An amazing goal and a complete credit to Emil Forsberg and what he can do in this league. And kids, that's why you pick your head up. Even when you're playing fullback, pick your head up, scan the field. Now, 5-1 victory over Loudon United, 2-2 draw against Red Bulls of New York. Can we take anything from these games? Well, like I said, the Fire at least showed up prepared to play. Looks like they wanted to play. They had the desire to be there. They're not just going through the motions, which is encouraging. The team appears to be fit. I'm sure there were tons of substitutions, but geez, if anyone can find me a substitution breakdown of that game, I'd greatly appreciate it. Email me, glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com, or direct message me on Twitter @GlassHouseSoccer. I would love to see the subs breakdown. I'm assuming there was a lot of rotation going on, but at least they were fit. No injury reports coming out of these games as of yet. Again, the one big injury, Carlos Turan, with the meniscus tear in his knee, and he'll be out. I think they were saying 4 to 6 weeks, but that seems very optimistic for someone who the Fire need to be playing full 90-minute games. So that's kind of my takeaway from the preseason so far. Some things to look at. I really don't see any player on the squad who is maybe a fringe first-team player making a case to be included in the first team or to push for that second spot on the depth chart, the backup position. I think Klopas knows who his starters are, and what we're going to see from a lot of the second team guys like Wooten, like Sergio Orahel, like Osorio, I think he's still with the club. Now I can't remember all the ins and outs of the CF2 signings. Is just, those guys getting those first team minutes and training exercises, and then possibly getting called up for maybe some cup competitions, or other, maybe if they end up playing a really, really bad team at home. But then again, the Chicago Fire are the bad team in the Eastern Conference right now, so we'll see if they ever get that opportunity. But really, they're just getting that great first team experience in the training, and maybe that'll translate to them coming in dog days of MLS summer, right? And giving a spot start or a spot rest to a few of the starters. Moving on to our next topic here, there was an excellent piece that Lizzie Bescherano wrote for 90minute.com, 90min.com, with an interview she did for Brian Gutierrez. Lizzie's a great follow for all things MLS, USMNT, Liga MX, Mexican Federation kind of crossover, and she really prides herself on that Mexican-American heritage and getting to know a lot of the Mexican-American players, dual nationals, things of that nature. So go follow her on Twitter at Lizzie_Bescherano, Becherano, and you can go find her on 90minute.com. And she wrote this article about an interview with Brian Gutierrez. The main quote here, the main things to know, she says, born in Illinois, United States to Mexican parents, the dual nationality midfielder could represent either national team on an international football level, but he has yet to make a clear decision. And that's true. We haven't seen Gutierrez go one way or the other as far as which federation he wants to represent. He hasn't gotten any first-team call-ups for the United States men's national team. He's played on some of the youth national teams. We're hoping he gets into the Olympic squad, and he actually does talk about that in some of his quotes here. So here's a quote from Gutierrez. Quote, "My approach first is to do things well on the pitch, and that will bring attention, but it'll be what's best for me and what's best for my heart. Obviously, what my heart feels, I will decide when the time comes, but I don't have a clear response yet." So again, what he's thinking about playing for the United States or Mexico. He went on to reveal that USMNT coach Greg Berhalter has made contact with him and is kind of keeping tabs on his situation as the Olympic Games approach. Quote from Gutierrez again, "The U.S. side has reached out. I've had talks with Greg where he talks about being part of the first team and the Olympics that are coming up in the summer." End quote. Lizzie goes on to elaborate that Gutierrez said Mexico has not made any contact, but Gutierrez will welcome any form of communication, saying, "I'm always open to talk and always open for both national teams." So that is Brian Gutierrez. I think he's being very diplomatic there. I don't think he's, shaking up soccer foundations here and causing anyone to panic, like, oh no, Guti's going to Mexico, we're going to lose a dual national to Mexico. But he's being very diplomatic. He's very thankful for the opportunity for both federations, assuming the Mexican Federation ever actually reaches out to him. And here is another great quote from Brian Gutierrez to end the article. "It's a privilege. I'm so grateful to hold both nationalities. Not every kid has this unique honor like I do, and I want to make the most out of it. The kids in Chicago like me, the Mexican Americans, they really look up to me, and I'm really thankful by trying to be the best role model. I try to make my city and my family proud. That's the most important thing for me. It's an honor to represent this community." So not only was he being very diplomatic in saying, I'll open the conversations to both, but he ends with a really solid quote. And I don't know if he's thought about, I'm sure he's thought about this. I don't know if he's prepared lines like this or if he's worked with anyone in PR or if there was any sort of pre-interview or kind of leaking some of the questions to him beforehand. But regardless of all of that, this is a very well thought out and a very mature statement from a 20-year-old footballer. This is a great quote by Gutierrez. Is he still 20? Is he 21? Seems like he's going to be a 20-year-old forever to me here. But it's a great quote. It shows his maturity. He is still 20 years old, as I do a quick Google search here. And it shows that he might be ready for a step forward in his development. I certainly hope that's the case. I certainly hope he gets more confident on the pitch, that he works on his goal scoring. He got one against Red Bulls in the preseason. I hope that's a trend. I hope that becomes a trend, a long-lasting trend, because I think Gutierrez gets himself into some really good positions, and he can work a really good 1-2 passing drill with his teammates. And I really think he does it well in tight spaces. When there's 2 or 3 defenders around him and a teammate, he seems to find just enough space to thread the ball through, or to take that little touch, that little maybe quarter turn, just to pull himself away from a defender's foot or leg or body, and to be able to get a shot off or to get the pass off. I think if Gutierrez works on his confidence, his shooting, not just his placement or the confidence to shoot, but if he works on a quick release, if he can improve the speed at which he shoots and which he gets a shot off, I think you'll see him drastically improve his assist and scoring numbers. And I think it can only benefit the Chicago Fire and his future, whether it be with the USMNT or the Mexican Federation. Great article, Lizzie. Looking forward to the next one. What also Lizzie puts out in one of her tweets after this article, and this is continuing along our USMNT lines, she writes from just a couple days ago, the most frustrating part of Brandon Vesquez choosing USMNT over Mexico is that the FMF, the Federation of Mexican Football, at least that's how I'm calling it, never reached out. Now, she's saying she's frustrated as a Mexican-American and someone who still has some fan loyalty to Mexico here. She continues, he's not the first Mexican-American I speak to that admits USSF maintains constant communication while Mexico holds back. The FMF's scouting department remains a concern. So that is someone who has found her niche in speaking with Mexican-American soccer players and has seen a pattern where the USSF, Greg Berhalter, that has always been a strength of him and his coaching staff. Player recruitment and communication with these dual nationals. As well as just communication with the first team where they're all over the globe. Like, that has been a huge strength of Berhalter and his staff. Whereas you have the Mexican Federation, as Lizzie puts it, holding back communication with dual nationals. So something to kind of keep an eye on here in Chicago for Brian Gutierrez, and something to keep an eye on the national scene for other dual nats. Cade Cowell, maybe. Now that he's playing in Chivas, maybe that changes the Federation, the Mexican Federation stance, and they'll have some communications with him. Who knows? All right, at this point in the show, we're about 22, 24 minutes in. Want to take a quick water break, quick sponsor break here to recognize Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water, clearly, pun intended. It's one of the best. And yeah, the pun intended bit, that's part of Skira. They have it on their website. That's something they sent to me to read. So yeah, they know how to make a good bottle of water. They know how to make a good pun. And Skira is available at your local 7-Eleven. Make sure you go grab a bottle or 3 when you're out. Now, in the second half of the show, I said we would talk transfers, moves, acquisitions. We are going to start with news that just broke earlier today, this Monday afternoon, the 29th. New acquisition here, first reported by Alex Calabrese of Men in Red. Chase Gasper traded to the Fire. And yep, like I said, if you're familiar with MLS, you're familiar with the name Chase Gasper. So let's see what Alex Calabrese writes for Men in Red. Chase Gasper is being traded from the Houston Dynamo to the Chicago Fire, sources tell Men in Red 97 Media. The one-time U.S. international will take up a supplemental roster slot and won't count against the salary cap for the next 2 seasons. And one-time U.S. international is right. He had one call-up to the USMNT back in 2020 against Costa Rica. And the U.S. fortunately won that game. So here, Houston will receive a 2026 third-round super draft pick in exchange. So the Chicago Fire get Chase Gasper. Houston gets a 2026 third-round super draft pick. So that's 2 years from now. That's a savvy business move. The article continues, Gasper, 28 years old, represents a solid MLS quality backup to newly acquired starter Andrew Gutman. Gasper's made 85 career MLS appearances, mostly for Minnesota United, but played just 5 times last season for the Dynamo. Now, it's kind of interesting to note, while I agree with the article that he's, a quality backup, the Houston Dynamo really took a step forward last year in terms of success on the field, contention for trophies, place in the standings, all that sort of thing. They changed their style. Ben Olsen, the former DC United coach, comes in, changed their style a little bit. So you found Chase Gasper, who, he was this quality player. He actually, at the peak of his MLS career here in 2021 with Minnesota United, he started, I think, 30 games that season, or at least had 30 appearances. Yeah, 30 starts that season, I believe, I read. And so he went from that 2 seasons ago to now being given away for a future third-round draft pick. I mean, shucks, even in NFL terms, that is not someone you have a lot of faith in, or someone who's really done well over the last couple seasons. But from the Chicago Fire perspective, like I said at the beginning of the show, like I've said in episodes past, talking about the Aragoni, Salquist acquisitions, right? That it looks like the Chicago Fire front office is making these moves from a financial standpoint. Does the Chase Gasper move really move the needle at all to the Fire solidly being in the playoffs, or even more so competing for trophies? Dare I say that at this point? It really doesn't. But they got essentially a free backup left back. Of course, one of the other goals they espoused at the beginning of the offseason was they want to make some intra-league moves, identify some talent within the league, and get them at value. So they have all but admitted that they are making a lot of good value moves and rather going out for the big splash. Now, maybe that's setting up to save a lot of money so they can sign a big designated player striker. Who knows? But the last time they dropped tons of cash was on Xherdan Shaqiri, and we haven't seen that work out. And in fact, I've compared it to LAFC, who isn't spending $7, $8, $9, $10 million on a designated player. They're doing it for $2 or $3 million, but they've got such a good scouting network. They're moving through DPs. They've got Carlos Vela. They've got a handful of guys who have been there, who are solid, who are core, and then they can rotate in guys like Denny Bouanga for a year or two and continue to have solid production. Maybe that's the best way to do it from a value perspective. Maybe that's what the Fire want to try, or maybe again they're saving their money to go throw it around and go get another $8 million striker for a couple 3 years. Who knows? The article here also writes that this trade is an extremely savvy one. Yep, as Gasper is essentially a free addition by all metrics. Just one 2026 third-rounder is going the other way in the exchange, and even then, clever accounting ensures that the Fire won't have to pay his full salary either, with Houston and LA Galaxy, covering part of it. Because Gasper will make up part of the supplemental roster, the portion that the Fire pay will not count against the cap. So it is an excellent move from a bookkeeping perspective. And according to the Major League Soccer Players Association website, Chase Gasper made $400,000 last season. Excuse me. His base salary was $400,000 last season. He was guaranteed $425,000. So real cheap, real solid accounting move from the Chicago Fire front office to get a left backup for Andrew Gutman. The next Chicago Fire acquisition, not so much for the first team, but someone who's anticipated to be playing with the second team. The Chicago Fire 2 acquired midfielder David Poreba on loan from Stal Mielec in Poland. So here's the announcement from Friday the 26th. The Chicago Fire and their Friday news announcements. I don't get it, man. Chicago Fire FC today announced that the club has acquired midfielder David Poreba on loan from Polish club Stal Mielec with option for a permanent move. "We are very excited to welcome David back home to Chicago," said CF2 General Manager Alex Bowler. "David is a player we've been targeting all offseason, and we're excited to continue developing his playmaking ability and build on his early success at the MLS Next Pro level." Okay. Again, kind of fluff. What we've come to expect from the Chicago Fire, and probably most teams at that. The article goes on to say Pareba's 21. He joins the club on loan after finishing the 23 season with Stal Mielec. Prior to his return overseas, Pareba was a member of Crown Legacy, Charlotte FC's MLS Next Pro team. He had 29 appearances, including 27 starts as a captain of Crown Legacy FC, and had 6 goals and 5 assists, leading the team in assists, and was third on the club with 6 goals. So there we go. Head coach Ludovic Talandier? I don't know. I got to work on my pronunciation there. CF2 head coach says, "We're eager to welcome another promising Chicago-born player to our roster. His mentality and ability to control the midfield shows his level of confidence and skill. We feel that he can be an important piece to what we're trying to build within our club." Again, kind of a fluff thing, but when they're trying to build a great attacking player, this actually could pan out to it. But again, he's 21. He's been playing with MLS Next Pro. I don't even know where Stal Mielec falls within the standings of, or the respect, or whatever you want to call it, the hierarchy, there it is, of Polish soccer. Right now, they're 11th of 18 in the Ekstraklasa, the Polish top league there. So if we look back to last season, they were also 11th. We look back to the season before that, and they were 14th. So, mid to low mid club in the Polish league there. But hey, maybe that's why he's able to come over here. He sees higher potential for himself. Being from Chicago, probably isn't going to take up an international spot. No, he was born in Chicago, holds citizenship in the USA and Poland. He's from Lake Zurich. Hometown says Lake Zurich, Illinois. Birthplace Chicago. So it can also be a good roster move to have another domestic player who we can develop and either sell on or cycle into the first team. All right, those are your Chicago Fire acquisitions that we had to report on. Chase Gasper news. Kind of cool to hear that they're still making some moves, that they are working on some deals. I would love to hear that DP striker news come through. But again, I'm not holding my breath. Please prove me wrong, Chicago Fire front office. Now, looking at around the league, as we usually do, we'll end with our lightning round here. Transfer Tracker updates. The Vancouver Whitecaps have signed Tristan Blackman to a contract extension through 2027. So they are shoring up their back line there. Colorado Rapids. Oh, here's some tangential Chicago Fire news. Colorado Rapids loan Miguel Navarro to Argentina's Talleres. So we talked about it a couple episodes ago, that they immediately got Miguel Navarro from the Fire, got a bag of cash along with it, and then turned around and loaned him out. So either Chris Armas took one look at this guy and went, no thank you, or this was always in the works, that they were able to loan him out to the club down in Argentina and kind of save some money on it. So a solid move by Colorado, getting rid of a guy who really underwhelmed in Chicago and probably cost them as many points in the standings as he did help them win games. CF Montreal have signed Bulgarian midfielder Dominik Yankov. Austin FC extend and loan out goalkeeper Damian Las. Philadelphia Union signed Marcus Anderson from the Spanish 3rd Division, so probably someone they've kept their eye on. I wonder if he's actually a Union Academy product or someone who had come up. Yep, here, just flipped over to the article real quick. Marcus, who holds U.S. citizenship, is a very physical and quick striker, Philly sporting director Ernst Tanner said in a release. So he'd worked his way up from the 5th Division in Spain, and they have picked him up. So that is fantastic. A young, domestic, physical striker. Gee, sounds just like the Philadelphia Union. The LAFC. Okay, LAFC end loan for Philip Krastev. Orlando City loan Gaston Gonzalez to Nacional. The Timbers signed Santiago Moreno to a contract extension. Okay, Timbers doing a little something. I don't see them having much of a great season, kind of given new coaching and some player turnover, but at least they're identifying some talent and keeping it around. NYCFC loaned out Nicolas Acevedo back to Bahia. The Red Bulls have signed their super draft pick Aiden O'Connor. And let's see if there are any other big names here or anything that jumps out of the page. Minnesota United signed midfielder Moses Nyman. That's an interesting one. 20-year-old arrives in Minnesota after being at Belgian second-tier side SK Beveren. All right, so they're building out their midfield. Ryan Gauld signs a DP extension with the Vancouver Whitecaps, so Vancouver liking what they see in Gauld and locking that up. Let's see. St. Louis City, here's some news. They transfer Nicholas Gioacchini, the U.S. international striker. They have transferred him to the Italian second division side, Como 1907. So keep an eye on Gioacchini if he is going to be banging in goals in the Italian second division, if that will help his chances with the USMNT, getting called back up there. He's only 23 years old, so he's still got a lot of football left in those legs. But the fee was reported for $2 million that could reach $4 million with add-on. So considering the way they brought him into the club, this is a definite monetary win for St. Louis City. And I'm forgetting the exact vehicle how they brought him in, but it was almost like they got him on a steal coming in from overseas where he wasn't getting much playing time. They were able to have an excellent expansion season, and now they're making some money of it and looking towards the future. So that's a good move by St. Louis City there. Let's see, where else are we? Nothing else to report since the last update. In case you missed it, Sam Vines, USMNT defender, former Colorado Rapids, goes back to the Colorado Rapids from his stint in Belgium with Royal Antwerp. And those are the big ones. So that is what's going on around the league. Again, is the Chicago Fire, and we've been saying this for the last year, essentially, at least since last summer's transfer window, that you've got a Chicago Fire team, and here I'm trying to bring it all back to our Chicago Fire conversation here, right? You've got a Chicago Fire team who was fighting for the wild card spot, fighting for that play-in spot in the playoff standing. What do they go out and do? They make value moves to just kind of maintain their defense, right? You get Chris Mueller back from injury, so that's kind of like adding a starting caliber MLS winger. You get Gutman, that's definitely an upgrade from Miguel Navarro, but you don't address any of your offense, right? You just kind of maintained your defense and your you've just maintained your attack, and you've slightly improved your defense. Bringing in Brian Dowd from the Super Draft as your number one pick, a goalkeeper, suggests maybe you're willing to move Chris Brady. So you might have a step down in your goalkeeping as well. And if Rafael Chihos continues to need some time off, pick up Knox, he's no spring chicken. Your defensive backline is also going to eventually wear out by the end of the season. So the Chicago Fire, at best, have maintained from last season, where you have all the other clubs around them, like Red Bulls, like Toronto, like New York City, improving their clubs. Now, Toronto may be improving, maybe adding by subtracting if the Bernadeschi loan goes through back to an Italian club, I think. But still, you've got all these other clubs who are making moves, who are trying to do things. Let's not forget about Miami. They were bottom of the table, and they are betting favorites to win MLS Cup right now. Not that I'm gambling on that, but Every other club has done things to improve. Atlanta's improved. Even the clubs ahead of the Chicago. Atlanta's improved. Columbus has improved. They've all made signings, right? Nashville might be the one team we see take a drop this year, especially if the loan rumors for Hani Mukhtar or the transfer rumors for Hani Mukhtar are true. If Zimmerman gets a lot of time away with the national team, we'll see. Chicago Fire, they need to make a big signing before the end of this transfer window. It's the only way they keep pace with the rest of the league. And like with everything with this front office, I'll believe it when I see it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in once again. Please make sure you share the show, spread the news of what we're doing here at Feed the Fire. Like, subscribe, rate, review. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, let's go Fire.